Virginia. He is the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator, thank you for being here. Let's pick up where Christian left off, the consequences of this meeting and kind of the big picture. And what do you think the answer is to that question? Where does the U.S. stand right now with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and what happened in the Oval Office and how this is being perceived in capitals across the globe?
Well, Dana, I think most Americans were shocked. I guess in retrospect, if we think back, way back to Monday of this week, when the United States did something unbelievable, or at least this administration did, and in the UN voted with Russia, Iran, North Korea, Nicaragua, against the absolutely true statement that Russia started the war in Ukraine. America voted with the axis of evil on Monday, and people were reeling. What's been surprising this week is, I had a meeting yesterday, a number of us, senators, with the head of the Ukrainian secret services, intelligence services. They always start every meeting and thank America. They do it repeatedly. I've been in dozens of meetings with Ukrainians, and including Zelensky over the last couple of years. They always are deeply appreciative of American assistance. Remember, they've had 400,000 Ukrainians die in this 3-year war. At the same time, they've taken out 700,000 Russian troops, decimated a lot of Russia's military. And what that leaves us with now is, if the rug is pulled out and Putin becomes the big winner in a forced ceasefire, not only that disaster for Ukraine, but if anybody believes that Putin will stop at Ukraine, that he doesn't have in his eyes the Baltic states, Poland, and others, they are not students of history.
Well, that is, I believe, what President Zelensky was trying to get at when he said the following. I want you to listen to this portion of the meeting.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position.
And Senator, President Trump went on to say that Zelensky doesn't have the cards and he's gambling with World War III. President Trump and the people around him say that President Zelensky was being disrespectful there. What's your read?
I think, well, my read is that President Zelensky was not going to sit by and, as senior members of the administration, fabricate a story about who was the aggressor. He's got 400,000 dead Ukrainians that he has to stand up for. He's got a country that, yes, is pressed against the wall, that does need American assistance. But I grew up at a time, when we always thought our adversary would be Russia. Ukraine, in many ways, has taken on Russia. They are and taken out literally 2-to-1 in terms of Russian assets, and without the cost of a single NATO soldier. What I worry about, and for the president to say somehow we'll never feel bad. Well, I look at our Canadian friends. I mean, my mom's family's all Canadian. The Canadians feel like they are under huge threat in this geopolitical. Dismiss the tariffs for a moment. The understanding that Trump threatened to kick Canada out of the Five Eyes alliances. This is a resetting of the whole table of post-World War II geopolitics.
Real quick,
if we're
Senator.
not careful. And at the end of the day, I think we're going to be a bit of a loser in this long term.
Real quick, you said at the beginning of our conversation that the U.S. voted with the axis of evil. Is that what you think this is suggesting, starting with that vote and what we saw today?
Those words were not my. Let me just be clear.
Yeah.
Axis of evil has not been my terminology, but it has been used by politicians in the past.
Right.
And who do they talk about? Iran, North Korea.
No, I understand, but
Russia.
are you saying that this is a realignment
we
of the
bullied
U.S.?
Israel into voting with us. Pardon me?
Are you saying that this is a
I'm
realignment?
saying it was not. I am saying that the vote on Monday, where we wouldn't even state the truth about who started the war 3 years ago.
Right.
When our own intelligence were the folks that picked this up first. And actually, we were ahead of the Europeans on making sure we knew what Putin's view was to try to take not a bit of Ukraine, but the whole thing. To refute that now 3 years later is stunning to me. Absolutely. And the number of my Republican colleagues, we had a number of the Republicans meeting with President Macron, Democrats and Republicans in the national security leadership. We were all united in trying to make the case, yes, France, make the case to President, we need to stay united with our European allies. I just hope my Republican friends, are willing to state what their quiet views have been in terms of the long-term value of NATO and the Five Eyes and the kind of post-World War II relationships that are key. We've always prided ourselves on having allies and friends and not simply having client states or customers. I'm fearful that that can be undone if you have an administration that views everything as a short-term real estate transaction and not a long-term, potentially geopolitical realignment, which I hope is not taking place, but you sure can feel that buzz coming out of Moscow with Russian leadership saying this may be the opportunity to literally split America from the rest of democratic allies around the world. That would be a disaster.
Senator Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thanks, Dana.
And we'll be right back with our panel.